It's easy to think of Navy SEALs as legends, almost superhuman in their discipline and bravery. Their name alone sparks an image of the toughest training in the U.S. military. But in reality, they're still human beings, forged through sweat, pain, and a fierce determination not to fail each other. Daniel R. Dietz was one of those men. Sometimes quiet, sometimes an unstoppable force in training, he rarely drew attention to himself. If you saw him in a crowd, you might not guess he possessed the grit that would one day define him in one of the most tragic and heroic missions of the war in Afghanistan. And yet that remarkable spirit had been there since his childhood in Littleton, Colorado. He just happened to express it more through his actions than his words. Today we'll explore Danny Dietz's life story from its earliest chapters in Colorado to that pivotal battle high in Afghanistan's rugged hills. We'll talk about the lesser-known anecdotes, the personal moments that reveal the man behind the military uniform. Along the way, we'll delve into the operation now etched into American memory, Operation Red Wings. We'll reflect on the controversies that sometimes swirl around any military operation, especially one with such devastating losses. And finally, we'll look at why Danny's sacrifice still matters, why his story touches so many, and how it inspires those who seek an example of fierce loyalty in a complicated world. But first, let's step back in time to a simpler Colorado era that shaped young Danny Dietz. Born on January 26, 1980, in Aurora, Colorado, Danny grew up mostly in the Littleton area. Colorado is often celebrated for its picturesque mountains, scenic hiking trails, and the strong outdoor culture that draws so many to its slopes and valleys. For Danny and his family, those surroundings fostered toughness and adaptability. There's something about living among such natural grandeur. It teaches you that life can be both breathtakingly beautiful and unpredictably harsh. In Danny's case, that was a lesson he carried for the rest of his days. His family background also had a unique flavor. Danny's mother was of Cuban descent, and as a child he was exposed to both American and Cuban cultural elements. Friends recall him talking about his mother's heritage and how deeply he cared for his loved ones. People who knew him say that while he might have been reserved on occasion, he had a quiet sense of humor and a deep, abiding warmth once you got to know him. He wasn't the tallest or most imposing figure in the room, but if the conversation turned to anything he was passionate about, especially physical challenges or personal principles, his eyes would light up, revealing an undercurrent of determination. In Littleton, Danny led a relatively normal childhood. He wasn't without his share of teenage mischief, but he never drifted too far into trouble. Some claim that from an early age he had a particular fascination with the military. Maybe it was triggered by stories from older relatives, or maybe it was his own desire to push beyond everyday limits. Whatever the reason, as he approached high school graduation, the idea of joining the armed forces had become more than just an idle daydream. The concept of being part of something bigger, much bigger, tugged at him with increasing force. Graduating from Heritage High School, Danny made the decision to enlist in the U.S. Navy in 1999, just as a new millennium dawned. There was an allure in the idea of being tested, seeing how far he could go, and to do that within the ranks of the toughest training pipeline in the Navy. He set his sights firmly on the SEALs. Now, for anyone who's ever attempted BUD-S, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, it's well known that passing it requires more than physical toughness. You need an unbreakable mental edge. It's the kind of course that can humble even the most confident athletes. Legends of Hell Week, with its punishing sleep deprivation and relentless demands, have filtered through popular culture, but only those who've lived it truly comprehend just how brutal it can be. Danny was part of Bud S. Class 232, and by all accounts he confronted the physical rigors with steady determination. No dramatic boasting, no look-at-me attitude. He just put his head down and got it done. Teammates from that time say that Danny earned a reputation as someone you could count on to do his job without fuss. He wasn't necessarily the loudest or the flashiest, but he was a pillar of consistency, the kind of guy you'd be grateful to have at your side in a pinch. That reliability, that ability to remain calm under ferocious pressure would become a hallmark of how Danny carried himself throughout his service. After completing Bud S, he went on to further specialized training, emerging as a fully qualified Navy SEAL. He was eventually assigned to SEAL Team 10, where he would bond with the likes of Michael P. Murphy, Matthew Axelson, and Marcus Luttrell. To truly understand how Operation Red Wings came about, we need a brief glimpse into the war environment in Afghanistan. By 2005, the U.S. and its coalition partners had been active in the region for several years. Still, insurgent groups, including the Taliban, held sway in certain mountainous areas. The terrain itself, jagged peaks, narrow trails, hidden passes, gave local fighters a home field advantage. Operation Red Wings was conceived as a counterinsurgent mission aimed at disrupting militant activity in the Peck district of Kunar province. More specifically, the plan was to locate and target Ahmad Shah, a key Taliban leader known to orchestrate attacks against U.S. and coalition forces. For a four-man SEAL reconnaissance team, stealth was everything. Their objective was to insert into the high-altitude region, observe, confirm Shah's presence, and then call in the next phase. But as with so many clandestine missions, the margin for error was minuscule. The difference between success and disaster could hinge on a random passersby or the faintest noise that carried across the mountain air. Danny Dietz and his teammates, Michael Murphy, Matthew Axelson, and Marcus Luttrell, were determined to proceed. Their infiltration into the area started without major incident, but the silence of the mountains can be deceiving. In that remote environment, a chance encounter with local goat herders might unravel the entire mission. Accounts vary slightly, but the core story remains consistent. The team encountered local civilians and faced an impossible moral choice: release them and risk that they would alert Taliban forces or neutralize them and guarantee mission secrecy, but at a grave moral cost. The SEALs chose to release the shepherds. They had no way to confirm if or when those shepherds might tip off nearby Taliban fighters, but they chose not to harm unarmed civilians. It was a decision that would haunt them in the coming firefight, but it also underscored their code of ethics and adherence to established rules of engagement. Within hours, their presence was compromised. Taliban fighters launched a sudden ambush with overwhelming numbers. In a mountainous area where it's hard to identify the origin of gunshots and even harder to find stable cover, the SEALs found themselves in dire straits. Danny Dietz was hit early on. Reports indicate he suffered severe wounds, possibly to his torso. Despite crippling pain and the shock of being severely injured, he refused to retreat from his role as the team's communications specialist. He kept attempting to raise a signal for help, doggedly seeking a radio or satellite phone connection in rugged, obstacle-laden terrain. Each breath was a struggle, every movement agonizing, but giving up was never part of Danny's mental vocabulary. Those who've studied the after-action details suggest that even while bleeding profusely, Danny Dietz maintained his composure. He was reportedly trying to fix a communications antenna when more bullets struck him. Marcus Luttrell would later recall that Danny's refusal to let go of his responsibility was something beyond extraordinary, like he was actively willing himself to keep going, long past what most human bodies can endure. Danny's final stand was marked by a ferocious determination to protect his brothers in any way he could, whether by laying down covering fire or by desperately working to get a message out. Meanwhile, Michael Murphy realized that if they didn't get reinforcements, none of them would make it off the mountain. Murphy made a selfless decision to climb into an exposed area to make a call. In that process, he was mortally wounded, but he managed to complete the call for help to the Quick Reaction Force. A rescue helicopter was dispatched, only to be shot down by insurgent fire, killing all 16 service members on board. By that point, the situation was beyond dire. The four-man team on the ground was all but overwhelmed. Reports suggest that at least 8 to 10 Taliban fighters were killed by the SEALs, but dozens more kept pressing the assault from higher ground. In the midst of this unrelenting onslaught, Danny was hit multiple times. Still, witnesses say he continued to fire until he had no strength left. The terrain itself was an enemy. Each time the SEALs tried to reposition, they were forced to traverse rocky slopes, sliding or tumbling down. By the time Danny took his final breath, he had fought with a level of tenacity that defies imagination. Some who survived only by luck or providence spoke of Danny's last moments with a mixture of sorrow and awe, describing how his body finally succumbed, yet his spirit seemed unstoppable until that final instant. Operation Red Wings claimed the lives of Danny Dietz, Michael Murphy, and Matthew Axelson that day. Marcus Luttrell would survive, eventually found by Afghan villagers who risked their own safety to shelter him from the Taliban. The rescue of Luttrell, days later, closed one chapter of the mission, but the tragic loss of 3 members of the reconnaissance team and the downed helicopter still stands as one of the most devastating single-day losses in the history of naval special warfare. In the immediate aftermath, the U.S. Navy posthumously awarded Danny Dietz the Navy Cross, initially the Silver Star, later upgraded to the Navy Cross, and the Purple Heart. These honors recognize not only his extraordinary valor, but also the intense personal sacrifice he made in the face of near certain death. At home in Colorado and across the nation, memorials for the fallen SEALs sprang up. For Danny, there were statues, plaques, and ceremonies naming him among the bravest of the brave. His funeral drew people from all across the country who wanted to honor his heroism. But behind the official tributes and the formal memorials, the story of Danny Dietz continues in quieter, more personal ways. There's an often overlooked dimension to Danny's life, his relationships, especially the one he shared with his wife Maria. They married in 2003, and for the short time they had together, by all accounts, their bond was devoted and close-knit. Close friends recall that Danny's eyes softened whenever he spoke about her. He didn't brag about the details, but it was obvious how much his personal life kept him grounded, how a simple phone call or letter from home could inspire him to push through the most grueling training exercises. In fact, one little-known story comes from a friend who served alongside Danny in training. As the story goes, Danny received a piece of news from home, some small but meaningful update that left him beaming. The friend teased him for how quickly he shifted from stoic SEAL mode to an excited kid. And Danny just shrugged, smirked, and said something like, "When you know what matters most, you don't pretend otherwise." That quiet philosophy spoke volumes about the man he was. Even during the darkest, most intense missions, family and loyalty remained the pillars of Danny's spirit. Another less publicized anecdote involves Danny's tendency to mentor younger recruits. Despite his outwardly quiet disposition, if a new teammate or a prospective SEAL looked like they needed a little extra push or guidance, Danny would offer pointers. He might not be the type to give a grand motivational speech, but He'd offer a practical tip, maybe share a story of a prior mistake he'd made, all to guide the newcomer. It was these subtle gestures of camaraderie that made Danny respected and beloved among peers who understood his genuine character. Beyond the personal realm, there were aspects of Operation Red Wings and the war in Afghanistan that ignited debates. Some critics questioned the mission's planning and the intelligence that led the SEALs to that specific area without immediate support. Others argued about the rules of engagement. Why were the shepherds released? What could have been done differently? It's a delicate topic. Military ethics dictate that lethal force isn't used against unarmed non-combatants. But in hindsight, it's easy for armchair strategists to point out alternative paths. For the men on the ground, those decisions were made in seconds, guided by a moral code. Danny's story becomes an illustration of the real human stakes behind such decisions. There's also been discussion about the portrayal of Operation Red Wings in popular media. The film adaptation Lone Survivor introduced the story to millions, albeit with some creative liberties. Some veterans who knew Danny argue that Emil Hirsch, who portrayed Danny, captured certain aspects well, but couldn't possibly replicate the day-to-day mannerisms or the deeper emotional complexities of the real man. Nonetheless, the film served a broader purpose. It showcased, however briefly, the camaraderie and courage of the 4 SEALs on that mission. It brought an expanded public awareness of what Danny Dietz and his teammates faced. When we look at the historical significance of Danny's life and sacrifice, it resonates on multiple levels. For one, his story highlights the intense burden carried by small special operations teams tasked with high-stakes missions. In a broader sense, it reveals how even the most meticulously planned missions can spiral into chaos under the harsh conditions of unconventional warfare. Still, the largest lesson might be the human dimension, the unbreakable chain of trust and loyalty that SEALs share. Danny's final hours were a testament to the promise that no one will be left behind if there's any breath left to fight. He personified that in every moment of that tragic battle. In the years since 2005, Danny has become something of a touchstone for those seeking an example of pure dedication. You see the tributes at the Navy SEAL Memorial in Coronado, California, or in local honors in Colorado, where a statue stands as a reminder of one of Littleton's most courageous sons. But the real echo of his legacy is in how his fellow service members speak of him. Many describe him as an ordinary man who did something extraordinary simply by staying true to his commitments. Digging into archived interviews, you find a few seldom cited remarks from those who trained with Danny. One recalled a time when Danny was struggling with a particular underwater exercise. When asked if he wanted to step aside and take a breath, Danny simply shook his head and pushed through. Later, he said quietly, "If I back away now, I'll never forgive myself." It may not sound dramatic, but it's emblematic of the mindset that guided him. Failures or fears might come, but they weren't reasons to quit. They were reasons to press harder. That same stance and training foreshadowed the unwavering determination he showed on that Afghan mountainside. Another rarely mentioned detail is how Danny balanced his sense of humor with the weight of his responsibilities. During one stateside interlude, he reportedly pulled a harmless prank on a close friend by swapping out some gear before an exercise. The friend discovered the switch at the last second, leading to a round of laughter. In retelling that story, the friend remarked how it exemplified Danny's approach to life. He took the mission seriously, but he never lost his ability to inject warmth and mischief when the circumstances allowed. This emotional elasticity, the ability to be both a serious warrior and a genuine, humorous human being, was part of what made him so beloved among those who knew him best. Naturally, with any heroic figure, myths can grow over time. Some accounts may embellish the details, painting Danny as a larger-than-life persona from the start. But the truth is far more grounded, and in many ways, more powerful. Danny Dietz was a real person with everyday quirks, insecurities, dreams, and relationships. His extraordinary act of valor wasn't some scripted destiny. It was the outcome of a lifetime spent cultivating a sense of duty and loyalty that transcended mere words. He chose the difficult path again and again, forging a character that refused to yield under unimaginable pressure. In discussing controversies, it's also important to recognize that many military operations face post-action scrutiny. Critics might question everything from the intelligence that set the mission in motion to the adequacy of the helicopter's protective measures. Yet the bravery displayed by the men on the ground and in that ill-fated rescue bird isn't diminished by questions of planning. If anything, Danny's story highlights how individuals execute their missions to the best of their ability, even when higher-level circumstances are less than ideal. That tension between the perfect plan and the chaotic reality of war forms a backdrop against which individual acts of heroism shine all the brighter. From a broader perspective, Danny Dietz's actions resonate with themes of sacrifice and brotherhood that date back to ancient times. Men and women in uniform have always faced moments where the odds were overwhelmingly against them. In telling Danny's story, we're reminded that heroism isn't always about dramatic speeches or grand sweeping gestures. Sometimes it's about a man who clings to a damaged radio, bleeding in the dirt, doing everything in his power to protect the friends fighting by his side. The emotional gravity of Danny's final stand impacts people in different ways. For some, it stirs patriotic pride. For others, it elicits sorrow and frustration over the tragedy of war. Many see in Danny's devotion a reflection of what's best in humanity, the readiness to lay down one's life for a cause larger than oneself. In the years since, some have used the story to question if the mission was worth the cost. Others have drawn inspiration to serve, citing men like Danny as proof that a single individual can make a profound difference in the face of adversity. The moral is not about glorifying war, nor is it about dismissing the complexity of such missions. Instead, it's an invitation to remember that behind every headline or historical footnote lies a tapestry of real human experiences. Danny Dietz lived, loved, trained, teased friends, fought, and ultimately died as a man steadfast in his convictions. His memory now exists as a story we can pass on, not to romanticize conflict, but to illuminate how courage and compassion can coexist in one soul. If anything lingers in your mind after hearing about Danny, let it be this. In the depths of adversity, when bullets fly and fate turns grim, there are still those who choose to stand their ground for the sake of others. In that choice lies a power that echoes far beyond the final shot fired. Danny Dietz's story isn't just a tale of tragedy. It's a testament to the resilient, transcendent nature of the human spirit. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.